Hello friends, it's Kayla. In the month of January, I read 19 things. You can't see them all. There you go. We're gonna talk about them. Right now, they're not organized in any specific way, but if you're new here, every single month I organize them based on something new and random, like accuracy of title or least to favorite cover. I think because it's January, we're just kicking off the year, I'm going to do it in a pretty traditional rating scale from 1 stars to 5 stars. In preparation of this video, I often like to ask you all on Instagram, side note, follow me on Instagram if you want to participate in this, if you have any questions pertaining to what I read, so I can touch on the specific things and questions that you want me to. As always, you understood the assignment. I got questions like, which am I most likely to reread? Which do I think has the most mass appeal versus niche appeal? Favorite and least favorite covers? Which character would go viral on TikTok? Which book I think would be better consumed in a different medium? Which is a really interesting one. So we're going to touch on lots of different questions as I go through these books. To start with my lowest rating. Why did I decide to do that? My lowest rated book of the month is unfortunately Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. This is my first time with this author. Most of what I read this month I read because of this video. Because of the nature of a video like reading booktuber favorites, sometimes I end up with ones that I think I'm gonna like and sometimes I don't. So even some of my low rated ones I'm not mad about because I didn't have high expectations. Actually, I can answer one of the questions right away. Least favorite cover. I think it's this. I don't know. I just don't like it for some reason. This is a mystery thriller book about a woman who has gone to prison along with her high school boyfriend because they were convicted of murdering her best friend back in high school. The book kicks off with her first experience in prison, and then we're also in another timeline when she's getting out of prison, and then we're also following like the high school events that led up to the murder. Actually, one of the questions I got was to give each book a descriptive word, 5 letters, because of Wordle. If you haven't seen this video, I'll link it. So in honor of Wordle, I will give this the word error. It was an error for me to read it. It wasn't something that I liked. There were literal errors in the book, like spelling and grammar mistakes, and the characters just made a lot of errors. A lot of things didn't make sense to me. I gave this 1 star because I don't like how a lot of the characters were depicted. I think there was a lot of lazy character work. When a book is trying to pull off a plot twist, I want it to be in a well-crafted way and not in a way that just tells me a certain characteristic of somebody in the book 100 times to throw me off of a reveal that's going to happen later that you could never see coming because the character is described as this one specific thing. And because of that and the way that the characters were crafted, and I felt very intentionally misleading to us, it ended up being a really predictable story. There's a lot of action and it happens too fast in too short of a period and at the wrong time in the book. I've been known to like a gratuitous book and a gratuitous twist. It's hard for me to explain why this one didn't work for me in the things that it was discussing and the offensive depictions, because then I would have to defend other books that did that same thing. But just the handling of certain topics was not my style. So I gave it a 1. I feel bad now. Why did I decide to kick this off with negative opinions first? I don't know. Next up, another 1 star. Let me give it 1.5 out of respect. A History of Wild Places by Shay Earnshaw. Interestingly, least favorite cover was first. Favorite cover is next. I love this cover. I think it's interesting. It implies certain things about the plot. It gives you an interesting atmosphere. Unfortunately, I'm officially calling it that commune and cult books are not for me, which makes me worried because one of my most anticipated releases of the year is cult related. But I just don't think I can do it anymore. I think I'll give it one last go later in the year. But I understand how it can be appealing to people and why readers would want to read this type of story. Unfortunately, there are errors in this one as well where the wrong, there's just something that's wrong that gives away a twist coming later, which seems to be fine for some people because their enjoyment didn't hinge on not knowing the twist, which I don't understand. Because I feel like if the twist was a true twist, I could have liked the book. But again, everything in here, I just feel like you see coming from a mile away. It's following a character named Travis who is hired to hunt down people and find missing people. It's such a fascinating premise, especially when you add in the fact that he has this weird supernatural ability to like touch items and get feelings and see where that person has been. But that storyline turned out to be completely nothing, and we didn't get any real time with him anyway. We're mostly sitting in this commune with a couple people who are slowly learning that maybe the commune isn't what they've been told it is. They have been raised to understand that leaving it will get you sick, and there is this rot and sickness that takes over people's bodies if they leave and come back, and they can pass it around to other people. Still a fascinating premise, but it just was so boring. It was the same scenes over and over again. Like, how many times can you just read about people like being worried about maybe they're being lied to? There are a lot of books that I love that don't make sense, but I feel like the type of book that I love that doesn't make sense, the book didn't try to make sense. This book tried to make sense. It tried to explain things to you, and I still feel like it didn't do it well. It didn't wrap everything up. It didn't have a reveal that I ended up enjoying. I think my Wordle word for this would be point. Like, what was it? Where was it? I got asked with various books in the post, like books that I would compare it to, maybe different recommendations or fans of this might like this. One of mine that came to mind was The Grace Year. So if you're somebody who likes YA and who has read this and you're transitioning into adult books, I think this would be a good place to go. Or really any cult book, because I've never liked one. Let's move on to a 2-star. Sugar Run by Misha Marin. This story is about two women they're both women who have experienced difficult things in life, and they're coming together just to like gain something from each other. It's another book where we're following a character who's recently left jail, restarting their life. There are important and interesting topics that this book touched on. The inability to get work after a conviction, cycles of violence and self-destructive behavior, being a queer woman in a small town and the things that you experience. Unfortunately, my 5-letter word is empty. It's pretty empty as far as plot, empty as far as intent that I couldn't clearly understand, a little empty on impact. And apparently this is not an unpopular opinion. I also got asked, like, what's your most unpopular opinion? I thought maybe this would be it, because I thought maybe this did something for a lot of people. I just picked it up on a whim and never looked at the Goodreads, and upon looking at it, it has a super low average rating. I just never really got to know these characters or feel a sense of purpose for the story that I was reading. My next two is for a completely different reason, and that's just because this is not a book for me. Henched by Natalie Zena Walshatz is a superhero book. Clearly, that's a superhero. I picked this up because of a booktuber who I had other common favorites with, so I thought it would be fun to pick up something like outside of my comfort zone. Maybe learn something new about my reading and see if my reading has changed. It hasn't. I don't think a superhero action story is really for me, even though it includes some things that I could like. Me and revenge stories have a sordid past. I think I like them, then I think I don't like them. This character objectively was interesting to follow. She had a lot of very strong opinions on superheroes and supervillains. She ends up being severely injured by a superhero and feels this sense of duty to then take down superheroes and show the world that they do more harm than good. And I think that in its essence is a powerful story and something that I would be interested in. But just this character's point of view and the narrative voice was something I really, really detested. Storyline, fine. Development, fine. But the character herself, it was hard to understand where she was coming from because there were a lot of contradictory opinions, and it's not somebody, she's not supposed to be this likable, perfect character. She ends up having her own like villain origin story here. But I still just found it a real challenge to get on board with all the action, everything that was happening so quickly, while not really enjoying the perspective. Okay, The Humans by Matt Haig. This is a book that I definitely understand why people enjoy, and as somebody who enjoyed a book from him before, The Midnight Library, like, I get what this book could do for people, but it didn't do it for me. I feel like I would recommend this to the same type of person who enjoys like self-help type of books that have a really clear intent with them and want to make you feel a certain way about your life and about humanity. Some people have called this funny. I just found the main character, who is an alien, just like super irritating. He's basically part of this planet who has been watching the humans on Earth and think that they need to be stopped from like understanding this mathematical thing that this man has discovered that will change all of humanity. Humans aren't ready for it, so they are putting a stop to it, and they kill this man, and this alien takes over his body, and now he's responsible for finding out anyone else who he might have told this scientific mathematical equation to, and has to kill them too. And along the way, he just like learns about this man's life, learns about humanity, falls in love with humans, discovers a lot of things about the world and himself, and it's a really basic story. That's my 5-letter word. Someone asked me if they didn't like The Midnight Library, would they still recommend this? And actually that is who I would recommend it to. If you liked The Midnight Library, I feel like this has the same overall message, but if you didn't like that, and a lot of times when people don't like that, I find that it seems like it's because there's like a really unlikable main character. This one could work for you because he doesn't have a personality. He comes into it just not knowing anything except the mission that he's been taught to go on. He's just like asking everyone every 5 seconds, like, teach me about this, teach me about this. And he's kind of a blank slate. So perhaps that could be your vibe. Another 3-star, unfortunately, was We Need to Talk About Money by Ortega Uegba. I was worried about picking this up because it's not published here. I had to order it from the UK. And I thought that maybe one of the reasons was it was going to feel very referential to experiences in the UK and like money. And I was right in some regard. There's a lot of like social media type references that I did not get. I struggled with this. I don't know who on earth I would recommend this to. I would recommend this to people who find Ortega Uegba a really interesting person, which is me. I've read her other things. I think she's an interesting person to follow, and it's kind of a memoir about her life and just various experiences that she has had in the workforce and with her family and just growing up, her relationship with money, how it's changed, the things that she has learned. But it's not in an educational sense, and that's where it lost me. I'm interested enough in her and her life and learning about her, but then I also need that element of like the book offering something, some type of factual information, advice, and it didn't really. My word for this is could. It had a lot of potential. It could have been impactful if maybe each chapter left on like a summary that was very clearly laid out what I learned, what to take forward from my experience, how to apply this to your own life. Because with Little Black Book, I read it and it didn't have a huge impact on me because it has a clear audience of like people in college, university, art school who are just about to get into like their first career. It is purely like tips and tricks and helpful things. But with this, the overall message and tips and tricks are more so just like the title is We Need to Talk About Money. The idea of like hiding your salary doesn't benefit anyone, especially a marginalized or historically oppressed community. But if you already go into the book with that mindset, and like that is your opinion already if you pick up this book. And then if you're somebody who is like deep into your career and you've had similar experiences, like being the only woman in an office or leaving your job because of sexism or racism or classism, or you called out a wage gap and nothing was fixed. Sure, there's the relatability and you can have this common ground, but you still, I feel like, aren't gaining anything new. So I just don't know who, like what group of individuals would benefit from this. As far as the question of like what would be better experienced in a different medium, it's this. This as a series of essays, or this as a podcast with a co-host who like has the ability to call out like, okay, here's the experience you just shared. Now, how can someone else apply that? That's what would have made it more impactful than just like, negotiating is important. Class, race, and gender play a really big role in how you're treated. If your job makes you unhappy, don't work there. Overall, it is a good book. She is such a good writer. I loved hearing about her personal experiences. Beyond that, there wasn't much. Another 3-star was To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. My word for this is sleep, because I fell asleep reading it. Just kidding. My word is stuck, because I was stuck in this world for a month. I would read like 10 pages at a time and be like, did I gain anything from those last 10 pages? Or did I already hear this exact same perspective in the last 10 pages? I think this is a fine book. I think it's an engaging book. I actually find so much about this fascinating, but I think you really need to be an ultra sci-fi fan to enjoy this. And I'm just not that girl. I think this one might have the most niche audience. There's a woman who finds herself kind of alone, consumed by this alien. She's a super smart space traveling lady, and she meets up with all of these other characters who are all smart spacey people. There are space wars for reasons I don't think I fully understand. There are alien races that they have to defeat. I did not do myself a favor taking so long to read this because I don't think I know the plot. Actually, this one would also work for what medium this could be better consumed via, and that would be a TV miniseries, because the visuals would help. I struggled not so much with the pace of this, but the in-between scenes between major action moments. I didn't get a sense of what the tone really was amongst the crew. Because it was so much action and it was so fast-paced, those in-between moments when it happens in a movie or a TV show, you can visually see it. You can see why an action scene has just ended and how there's a sense of calmness in the atmosphere, and these little dialogue moments and just like sitting down and eating together, why they are taking place and why the tension has been relieved. But I just got lost in the action of it all, that I found myself struggling between scenes. Even though I was enjoying the scenes just fine, I just never knew when it was going to end or when it was going to shift into something else. The question of, can you read this kind of mindlessly or do you really need to pay attention? It is the latter. This is an audiobook that you would listen to like on your daily walk, as opposed to while you're doing like a craft. Next up, talking about a lot of learning, I've got Legend Born by Tracy Deonn. I had to do a lot of learning. King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table, I know nothing about. And upon finishing this, probably still don't know anything about. Not only did I have to learn a lot, but our main character had to learn a lot. We're following Bree. She's just starting at this school, and it's like an urban fantasy vibe where she gets involved with this order. There's this whole magic system she has to discover because she has had no previous experience with magic. Her mom recently died, so there's a grief storyline. Her family and her ancestors come into play as well with the magic system. The writing of this was beautiful. I loved everything that she included, and I think I can objectively see that this magic system is very well thought out. I'm just not used to having to learn this much, and as we have a character who knows nothing, so much of the book is her learning, and it's just info dump after info dump. And I think this could have benefited from having another POV, because there are quite a few characters who are in the order who know everything, and rather than it just being them teaching her, it could have been them teaching us, but in a more nuanced way that like took their own experiences into the storyline rather than just like factual stuff. There's basically two different magic systems and they're kind of battling. So she's like learned about this one thing that's going on. She knows there's more to her mother's death than just reality. So she's learning about that and learning about this group of people. And then there's another group of people that become involved who are like, oh, everything that you just learned, we actually feel the opposite about what they had to say. So then she has to figure out like who she trusts and who she belongs with, which also ties into a love triangle, which I loved. The reason that I'll be picking up the sequel and that I ended up giving this like a 3.5 star is because I really was interested in her relationships with these two different people, the things that she's learning from them, and I'm just so interested to see what's going to happen in future books. And I think since we had so much information given in here, there's a lot more opportunity in future books in this series to have more like mundane activities, like her relationship with her roommate and her friends. I wanted so much more of, because I can see what Tracy Deonn wanted to accomplish. There's no throwaway characters here. Like they did have a conversation where she was friends with somebody and then their friendship got kind of different because she got involved with this magic system. So clearly the author is aware of all of these different dynamics and that they are important with every single person that she meets. We just didn't get enough time with all of them for me to fully feel invested in everything that was going on. But I'm interested in the relationship dynamics and how and what we learned about those characters as the book went on. So my word is learn for this one. Okay, I just moved some things around. I think the remaining books here are all 4s and 5s, so they should be quicker because I don't really have rants to do, which is apparently where I talk the most. This one was a 4-star. It's called The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho. The word is quick. I think some people will think it's too quick and that it should be a series of novellas or a longer thing. I just realized I haven't really shared many comp titles yet. So Upright Women Wanted, I think if you loved this, you could enjoy this. It's basically about this group of bandits, and our main character is this nun who ends up traveling with them, basically traveling with like sacred objects, selling things, doing things they shouldn't be doing. She ends up joining them on their journey, and we learn about the importance of like these sacred items. And I'm not selling this very well. It's a tough one to sum up. It's like an adventure story. It's a little wild. All of these men basically don't want her coming with them because they don't think she's going to offer them anything, and they're very clear about what they want from her. They're like, oh, she's this religious figure, she obviously like can't have sex with us, and she's probably not gonna cook for us, like what is she worth? And it ends up being just a really interesting commentary on her perspective, and there are some other characters who become more of main characters as the book goes on. There's some interesting conversations regarding gender, and this is like a futuristic, I'm gonna say like 500 years in the future too, story. And I think based on that and based on like the cultural significance in the story, conversations around gender and how people are perceived is just a very interesting thing that comes up in here. And I just thought it was a fun time. I would read more of this world if it was a series of novellas. So let's move on to another short book that I gave 4 stars. Piranesi by Susanna Clark. My 5-letter word is smart. I think Piranesi in his essence is a smart character. He has been tasked with protecting these like halls of knowledge. It's a labyrinth that he lives in. There are tides that come in, and he just has to remember everything. And then we find out that maybe he has forgotten things. The writing is this weird like word game. It's like that joke, like who's on first? He's on second. What's his name? Who? Where? It's got a very cheeky kind of writing style. And there's this other person called The Other who comes and visits Piranesi, and they have this weird dynamic, and then he thinks that there might be somebody else entering the labyrinth, and he just has to figure out what's going on. Has anyone ever summed this book up well? Like, I need to go watch a review. I feel like I can pretty much recommend this to anyone. It's a book that's intentionally confusing but has a good payoff at the end and explains itself. It's a lot easier to read than I thought it would be, and I feel like I can recommend it to any kind of reader. I think just typically if you like weird things that don't follow typical novel writing rules, then you could enjoy this. I think it's a good story. I don't know about like when I see it as people's all-time favorite, it's a little surprising. I just thought it was good. Maybe I need to read it a second time. Oh, and for the question of who would become a TikTok star, Piranesi, if he got access to a smartphone and TikTok, I think him sharing just his perspective on himself and the world and knowledge would just be fascinating. Next up, let's talk about Walhalla by Nikki May. Ooh, my 5-letter word for this is messy. I love a toxic friendship story, and as far as who I would recommend this to, I think like fans of Leanne Moriarty this could work for, but I actually think that this could be the answer to one of the most niche books, just because I really think that it's about your kind of perspective going into it. If you pick this up thinking it's going to be a thriller, I think you will be disappointed. If you go into this thinking it's going to be a friendship drama, you might think it gets a little like ridiculous by the end. For me, as someone who loves reading multiple POVs and just learning about the inner thoughts of all of these women in this friendship group, and then a new person comes into the group and shakes things up. Like, that's such a good thing for me. But it has to be done well. I have to feel like the characters are very distinct. I have to understand their relationships with each other. And if it's a thriller, I need it to get really dark. And if it's just a friendship drama, I need it to be really calculated. And I think that it was. All of these women have different things going on in their lives. Some of them are happily married. Some of them are not happily married. Some of them look at each other and judge each other. Some aspire to be each other. They don't have this perfect friendship by any means. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of whispers behind each other's backs. But then when this other woman, her name's Isabel, and she knew one of the other women when they lived together in Nigeria. Now they're all living in the UK, and what brought them together originally is their Nigerian background. Walhalla means trouble, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't think it said it in the book, but somebody told me. And basically Isabel makes them all feel important. Like, they're not a strong enough friendship group that it's not easy for them to occasionally feel left out. So what Isabel does is make them all feel like important, like they can do anything, and gets like secrets out of all of them, and then just shares it with the other girls and talks behind everybody's back and just makes everything a lot more tense. I don't know who I think would be the TikTok viral hit, but it does feel like one of these women could do it. Perhaps Boo. Like, I want to say Isabel, but Boo is a very interesting character. This gets compared a lot even in here to the Sex and the City women, and like, it's unfortunate that the only references I really have are media with a group of white friends. So I apologize, I don't have a better comp title for this, but all of the other times I have read this dynamic, it's been in a thriller, and I don't want to compare this to a thriller because I don't want to set your expectations wrongly. Okay, next up, we've got The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kiersten White. 4.5 stars. This is the story of Elizabeth Frankenstein, who has been taken in by the Frankenstein family to be like friends, a companion to Victor Frankenstein. Later in life, he ends up vanishing and she wants to go track him down. It's a really fascinating character study of this woman who you don't get a lot of in the original like Frankenstein story. And it gives reason for a lot of the motivations and the things that she does, the type of role that she's taken on in Victor's life. And I just found it a really interesting story to follow, and learning about this woman and power, I think, is the word I would use for this. Because whether you agree with the role that she has taken on, she does make her own decisions. There's a power in making her this main character. And it's interesting because one of the questions was like, what book did I think about the most after putting it down? Which one kept coming to memory? And it was this one for the first couple weeks of the month. I read this one pretty early on and I kept thinking back to it, but now trying to remember all of the plot points is not easy. It was a really slow moving book, so go into it with those expectations. And she's like traveling around looking for Victor, staying in different places, not making it sound particularly interesting. And it's not exciting, but it was interesting. When I was reading it, I was interested. Next up, an equally slow-moving book, I have Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey, which I bought my own copy of. I still have the library book. Somebody remind me to return it. I don't know what my word for this one is. Ocean. Terns. This woman, Franny, wants to follow these Arctic terns as they're migrating, because we're in a near future setting where climate change has made it so a lot of things are dying off. The world is slowly ending. A comp title that I would give you is Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waukesha Grice, because it's more insular and about a community and about a character, more so than like the end of the world, let's learn about everything going on. It is not about the world. It barely actually gives you any information about what the world looks like. It's just this woman who's on a ship with a group of men, found family vibes. They don't want her to join them. That's really a trend in many a book I've picked up recently. This woman is not a likable main character. She's not even a knowable main character. You constantly have to change your understanding of who she is and what she's telling you about herself throughout the book. She has something to offer these fishermen. They have something to offer her. She's in a dark place. She's in a transition in her life. And again, just the character study of it all the slow moving plot. It was just such an interesting story. Now we're into my 5 stars. So first up I have Where the Drowned Girls Go by Seanan McGuire, which is book number something in the Wayward Children series. I brought them all because somebody asked me if I could rank them. Somebody also asked me what book I'd be most likely to reread of all of these. And not of all of these, but of all the books this month, and it's this one. Because I do plan next January, yes, I'm planning my content a year in advance. I plan to read all 8 books that will be out in the series and ranking them officially, because there's some I haven't reread for so long, and then come tumbling down because those are like a pair. Then it's Where the Drowned Girls Go. Then it's the first book. These two I don't really remember, and I feel like they're kind of interchangeable. And the last one is Across the Greengrass Fields, which is the only one I haven't given 5 stars. So that's my ranking right now, but you could argue, I could argue that this is my favorite book in the series, but I would need to reread the others before making that official distinction. There's no doubt that the character I connect to most, understand most, and enjoy reading the most is Cora. She comes from a world of like mermaids, but this book is not set in her world. I want to make that so clear because it's the mermaid book in the series. Like, this is the vampire book, this is the unicorn book, but it's more like this is the mermaid girl because she is just in the real world. She was at Eleanor West's home and then she moves on to another school because it's going to offer her something different. Eleanor West's school is about accepting that there are other worlds and there are doors that children enter and they have to live in the real world again and coping with that. But the other school, with a very different person running it, is about forgetting that world and accepting that you created it in your mind and you need to recover from whatever mental health things are plaguing you. I just loved how that entire story went down. I loved the introduction of other characters we've met before and how they interacted with Cora, and it was so good. Did I give a word for that? I want to say a like, because her relationship with herself is something that I really connected to. Next up is Come Closer by Sarah Gran. My word is steak. Steak, not steak. Because the stakes are very high in this book. It's a story about demonic possession. It's a silly book. It's a weird book. It's a dark book. This woman takes a quiz that's like, are you possessed by a demon? Because she's starting to forget things and she's starting to do things that feel uncharacteristic of the person she knows herself to be. And it just gets more and more wild as the book goes on. I feel like if you also relate to this fear of one day like not being in charge of your own decisions, losing your sense of self, like this could really work for you. It's a very bleak book. You don't really see any hope for this character. She's just trudging through every day, trying to get out of it. She's going to seek professional help. It's very short and to the point, which I love so much. We didn't waste any time. This gave me the feelings that I wish and that I expected Night Bitch to give me. So I would highly recommend it, but I don't really know who to. Moving on, we've got Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. My word for this is teeth. No, my word for this is anger. This is a short novella, very effective novella. I'm always just impressed when a novella accomplishes so much and really manages to have so much action and conversation while fleshing out the characters so incredibly well. These characters are so easy to know and to understand. Their dynamics are fantastic. They're all protecting each other. They're all working together to take down these Ku Kluxes. And I think a comp title for me, or just like if you enjoyed this, you might enjoy this, would be The Deep. Just because they both have such like historical relevance and cover horrific trauma regarding enslavement, racism, white supremacy, but have like a speculative twist on it that make it a really like powerful narrative. Also, them being so short but having such dynamic characters is just impressive. I've said before, but books that pair the horrors of humanity with actual like creatures, the horrors of demons. That's often very successful for me. The binding, like magic in here and weaponry was really interesting to learn about. I also think that just the world building, because there's so much world building that has to happen within the author's mind that isn't even on page. For a book like this to be successful, like that's just impressive to me, how you know that there's such a bigger world and explanation for things. So I was highlighting like all of just the description of how these demons came to be, because that explanation was so short but like imperative to understanding the story. Actually, I have another book here that I would recommend if you enjoyed those things in certain conversations. And that's Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. Very different story, but I think I just don't read enough like evil creature books that they seem more similar to me than they actually are. Okay, next up, on a lighter note, hey, happier books are near the end. That doesn't always happen. Not that this isn't a happy book. I guess what I really mean is middle grade, because this is a sad book, but it's obviously lighter than an adult book would handle the same topic. Anyway, it's about a girl whose grandma's dying. Not light at all. This is called When You Trap a Tiger by Tay Keller. It has a little bit of magic. There is a young girl who's moving with her mother and her sister to stay with her grandma, her Harmony. I'm sure I am butchering that Korean word. But basically there's this really interesting storytelling vibe in here. Her grandmother told her these stories as she was growing up, some of them to do with this tiger. And then on this trip to stay with her grandmother before she learns that she's sick, she sees this tiger in the road that no one else sees. And it just adds a connection for her to her heritage and to her grandmother. Lily just goes on this really lovely journey throughout this book of coming into her own, being stronger in her convictions, you know, willing to be vulnerable, having to be strong in difficult situations. She ends up striking a deal with this tiger to kind of save her grandma in exchange for something. I would recommend this for fans of A Monster Calls. It has a similar impact and the storytelling like plays a big role. It was really beautiful and it's 5 stars. The other middle grade I have is also 5 stars. It's Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. Amari is a young girl whose brother is missing, and one day she finds a suitcase and she gets a message from her brother inviting her to this kind of secret society that he was involved in. So she ends up going under the guise of it being like a summer camp. And there are fun aspects of like her earning badges, her having to accomplish different tasks. Everybody there has different skills, but she's immediately ostracized because she has like an illegal skill, which her brother also had. But because he has this certain legacy, she also has to live up to this certain idea. And she's also just trying to find her brother. It's a great parallel to what she's experiencing in real life and not feeling like she belongs, not really understanding her role in her life and not having all the opportunities that she wants. She has to combat a lot of expectations of her and just goes on all of these little adventures. I'm really excited to see where the series goes. I'm reading it with Liam and I think a lot of things happen to Amari, and I'm excited for Amari to grow and take a lot of chances in future books. There was obviously a lot of setup in here. The first book in a fantasy series, you have to just understand so much. It was easy to understand. Liam really enjoyed it. And I think this is the one I would say has the most mass appeal. Clearly adults can enjoy it. Kids can enjoy it. It has amazing ratings. Like, I haven't seen a book this well received in a long time. Lastly, final book of the video, the one that matches my sweater, the favorite of the month is Finlay, Donovan is Killing It by L. Cosimano. If you like Sophie Kinsella, but you wish that Sophie Kinsella would write a stupid mystery book, like, this is for you. This gave me big Sophie Kinsella vibes. It's just ridiculous and over the top, and I don't think this is a book I would have liked like 5 years ago when I wanted a darker, grittier, more interwoven, intellectually stimulating thriller. This is just about a woman. She's an author, she's a mom, she's tired, and she is overheard talking about her book one day in a coffee shop and talks about like how she has to kill somebody in the book and how she's gonna do it and blah blah blah, and somebody overhears her, thinks that she is talking about herself and is like a hit woman, and hires her. She just gets herself in this ridiculous scenario and makes every mistake possible as a novice murderer. This is a very action-packed, fast-paced, ridiculous story. There's a couple side characters who are equally as well described and have full, very strong personalities. I loved every single one of them. There's a little love triangle in here that I loved. I'm so fascinated to see where these relationships go in the future. This is going to be a 4-book series. I wouldn't recommend this to everyone. In fact, I don't know who to recommend this to because I don't think I have a comparable mystery to throw in there. I've never really read a protagonist like Finlay. Somebody asked if this would make a good book club book, and I absolutely think it would, because even if people don't like it or don't like her, there are so many things to like talk about with other people. This is a fun book, but it's also stressful. You're anxious about what's about to happen, and a book that can make me feel anything is gonna get points. Those are the 19. I'm done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found something that you will now be interested in reading, or like so many of you like to remind me in the comments, we have nothing in common and you never read anything that I would read. And if you still stuck around, I really appreciate it. If you're still here at the end, give me a little flower emoji. I like the pink one. I'll see you later. Bye.